My friends, there is quiet maneuvering underway in the corridors of the State Department in Washington that the Brazilian government simply cannot read. While the Planalto Palace believes it is drawing Donald Trump into a tariff war, the counterattack being planned is much more personal, surgical, and devastating. In fact, Lula has just doubled down by canceling the credentials of an American agent here in Brazil. Yes, my friends, all this happened after the expulsion of the federal police chief from the United States for setting up a fake operation against Alexandra Ramarem. Well, sources connected to American diplomacy reveal that Trump's target is not Brazil's economy, but the individuals you see every day in the news. What you're going to see today is the inside story of a strategy that could put Supreme Federal Court justices and National Congress leaders on a list that nobody wants to be on. The miscalculation in Brasília is historic. They thought they were playing a national chess game, but Trump has already flipped the international board. What is emerging is a regime that has become immune to internal responses, but has just discovered that the world is much bigger than the three powers square. And to understand the hole the government is digging, you need to look at who's holding the shovel. Backstage information indicates that there is direct guidance coming from Sidonio, Lula's political strategist. The government's campaign went into panic mode because the popularity of opposition figures like Flavio Bolsonaro is spreading much faster than any research institute predicted. Even Datafolha and Quest, which are traditionally more left-leaning, have already shown the government losing ground. Sidonio's strategy is clear. They need an external enemy to inflate a false sense of nationalism. They remember that in 2025, when Trump imposed tariffs, Lula used that to recover in the polls. At that time, there was a colossal injection of 80 million reais in advertising by SECOM to hide corruption scandals like the PIX case and the Banco Master scandal, which simply disappeared from the news. Now Lula is trying to do the same thing again. Almost every week he makes direct provocations to Trump, talking about the war in Iran, about Venezuela, and even making veiled attacks regarding the feud between Trump and the Pope, including canceling visas for American envoys in Brazil. He is begging for tariffs so he can play the victim of imperialism in the 2026 election. But Trump and his team have figured out the game. They know that tariffs punish the Brazilian people, and Washington's goal is not the people, but the system that supports the regime. Instead of an economic sledgehammer, they are sharpening the scalpel of the Magnitsky Act. The Brazilian government requested a date for the meeting on March 16th, but Washington ignored the request and instead announced the arrival of Darrell Bay, the senior advisor for Brazil. Lula's response was an unprecedented diplomatic insult. He unilaterally canceled Darrell Bay's visa. This act of irritation sealed Brasília's diplomatic fate. And during this time, Trump has already met with 15 heads of state since March, but Lula is still being left out. Now, analyze the real impact of what is being prepared. While Brasília sows provocations, it will face enforcement under the Magnitsky Act. This legislation allows for the freezing of assets and a total ban on visas for individuals involved in human rights violations or corruption. In practice, this represents international civil death. Imagine an official who feels like the owner of Brazil, having their international accounts blocked and being prevented from setting foot on American soil. And there's more. The list circulating in Washington is extensive and is being updated in real time. Sources indicate that almost all the justices of the Supreme Federal Court are being monitored, except for Luis Fus, Cássio Nunes Marques, and André Mendonça. Names like Gilmar Mendes and Alexandre de Moraes are the main targets, but the list goes further. It includes the President of the Senate, Davi Alcolumbre, the former Secretary General of Brazil's Superior Electoral Court, José Levi, and even figures like Moraes' assistant judge. There is even a mention that if Bessias is nominated to the Supreme Court, he would already join the court already under sanctions. The global financial system responds immediately to these sanctions. When the United States applies the Magnitsky Act, banks in Europe and Asia close their doors to these individuals. And Roberto Barroso, let him tell you, he gave up. He gave up becoming a justice precisely because he was sanctioned and about to be sanctioned under the Magnitsky Act. The power they wield within Brazil becomes useless when they can no longer cross the border or move a single dollar outside of it. It's the end of impunity for those who believe that the Brazilian laws they shaped themselves would be enough to protect them forever. The fact that the government tries to hide at all costs is the public's true sentiment. Unpublished surveys conducted in January and February revealed a historic fact. For the first time, the impeachment of Supreme Court justices surpassed health, security, and employment as the #1 concern of the Brazilian people. This desire for justice is not just an internet narrative, it's a statistical fact that shows the system has lost touch with reality. The population realized that the institutions have been hijacked. While economic tariffs have low approval, the application of the Magnitsky Act against specific authorities has the support of more than 70% of Brazilians. The people want to see justice done, even if it comes from outside. The Banco Master scandal and recent legal maneuvers have only increased this support. The average Brazilian understands that if there is no institutional response within the country, international pressure is the only way. When the masses took to the streets in São Paulo with signs calling for the application of the Magnitsky Act, they were not just carrying foreign flags. They were sending a clear signal to Washington that the current regime does not have popular legitimacy to keep trampling on individual freedoms. And the #1 priority for Brazilians today is cleaning up the judiciary, and Trump knows that. And he doesn't need a trade war. He just needs to give the people what the Brazilian system refuses to deliver. Now notice how the regime was built to be impenetrable. Today there is no longer any institutional capacity to respond. Gilmar Mendes changes impeachment laws to protect his peers. Alexandre de Moraes looks for precedents from cases 2 years ago to create instant legal shields. They created a system that has become immune to any internal oversight. It is a consolidation of the regime where power was usurped and the institutions were turned into tools of self-protection. And that's why some Brazilians who are in the United States have become so vital. They're not just passing through. They have become an information conduit, operating as a living archive of information for the American government. They bring the documentation, the facts, and the evidence of the violations that occur in Brazil, and Washington makes its decisions in a sovereign manner. But now it has access to the truth without the filter of the traditional Brazilian media. And understand, these Brazilians in the United States are not working against Brazil. They are working against the individuals who have hijacked Brazil. And the result of this work is the total isolation that Lula faces today in the United States. Now pay attention. Will Trump act before or after the 2026 elections? The answer lies in the deafening silence of Washington. The Brazilian government is isolated and the meeting Lula wanted is no longer on the calendar. Brasília's miscalculation was believing that the world would passively accept the consolidation of an authoritarian regime disguised as democracy. The scalpel is being sharpened. The new war is not waged against nations but against the personal tax IDs of those who dare to challenge the principles of freedom. The era of the untouchables is coming to an end, and the first sign will be the freezing of accounts and the cancellation of visas for those who today think they own the truth. What we're seeing is the end of an era of international impunity, and you know we're on rented land. It only takes a signature for them to take our show off the air, to take down our channel. Yes, that's true, and that's the reality we live in today. Therefore, I created a censorship-free platform. There they can't reach us, and there we don't depend on algorithms. The QR code is on the screen. The direct link is in the video description and in the first pinned comment. There I provide even more in-depth reports with names, without censorship, without fear of being taken down. So come join. We already have more than 3,000 members who participate there and help keep our content active here. Because they've already understood that you need to shield your mind to survive in this chaotic world. And we've also created our own movie and series channel with no unnecessary drama or culture wars, just selected content for you to enjoy with your family, right there in your home. The link is showing up on the card and also in the description and in the comments. Shield your mind. I'm Shimon Oliveira and I'll see you in the next video. See you then.